A hugely significant Daily Record front page as the paper backs Labour for the first time in 14 years. As the Tory betting scandal widens, Rishi Sunak finally takes action. Why is it taking so long? Labour's Rachel Reeves is on the cusp of becoming the country's first female Chancellor. Can she balance the books? I'm Lorna Hughes, and this is Planet Holyrood.
It's important we look at the facts. Politics has to be about service.
A modern form of national service.
The outcome, that's for the voters to decide.
Hi, well, lots to talk about today. I think one of the main things has got to be the record coming out for Labour. Quite a front page today, Paul. It's been 14 years since the record endorsed the party. Why is this important?
Well, you're right about the timescales on it, and I joined the paper, I think, 2019. My understanding is that the record hasn't explicitly backed a political party at a general election since the 2010 GE, which I think would have been Gordon Brown's election, the one that he lost. Since that period, I think it'd be fair to say that the record's views that Labour has not been blessed with particularly effective leaders, both at a UK level and a Scottish level. I think that reached its peak with Jeremy Corbyn. And so in that sense, I don't think Labour has really put forward candidates to be Prime Minister that were really in keeping with some of the pretty good candidates they had in the past. Our view now is that Labour has got its act together. Keir Starmer is an impressive person to be Prime Minister. He's reformed this party. He's put them back on the same page as voters in every part of the UK. And we just felt like, the Record's a campaigning newspaper. We have ongoing campaigns and things like drug deaths and other matters. We just felt like we couldn't really not say something in this election, and that Labour was the obvious choice. And I think that's reflected in the robust front page that we put out this morning.
It was. It was interesting, though. I think, a lot of what you mentioned in the front page, or rather the Record mentioned in the front page, isn't necessarily, we are giving implicit support to Labour. It's like we need change and we need these things sorted. And obviously it was laid out. Is that not the feeling that, the kind of Tory government has come to an end? We need things fixed everywhere now, and we've got to take a chance, and we've got to see the public should believe in Labour.
Yeah, I think that if you look over the last 50 years, Labour victories in general elections have been a rarity. They've not been a particularly successful political party at the ballot box. But this time it feels different. I do feel like this is the most important general election since 97, perhaps even 1945. It feels like the Tories have run out of road on so many areas. Not just in terms of the economy and the cost of living crisis, but also things like standards in public life. And I think that's why we did what we did. I think we're absolutely clear that this election is not about independence. I don't think that regardless of the result, there's going to be an independence referendum or independence is going to happen. So even though Scottish politics has changed fundamentally since 2014, this feels like it's about who should be in Downing Street. Is it going to be Labour? Is it the Tories? Is it going to be Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak? And we're absolutely clear at the Daily Record that we would much prefer Starmer and Downing Street to Rishi Sunak.
Is the danger, Paul and Hannah, is the danger that if the Labour Party don't take action and things start changing quite fast, that will have ramifications in 2026 for the Holyrood elections, won't it? It will be the first test as to whether or not Labour have managed to turn around some of these things that they're promising. Hannah, what do you think?
That's, definitely a fair assumption. I think Labour also need to show that they can turn things around and make some sort of impact, direct impact to people's lives quite quickly, because as Paul says, you know, unfortunately Labour have not always been very successful at the ballot box. They're not a party that, you know, even though clearly they have been in power, usually it's, you know, 2 or 3 terms of the Tories, and then once everyone gets sick of the Tories, it goes back to Labour for maybe 1 term, and then Labour mess it up, so then it goes back to the Tories again. And I think, you know, to try and break that cycle this time, they need to really come in and make an impact quite quickly. And then, yeah,
and that's going to be really hard, because, you know, we have no money. You know, the pot is small. They can't do everything that they want to do. But do you think there's an expectation that they will have to do quite a lot, quite fast then?
I think momentum is important, and if they get a few quick wins early doors, you know, if you go back to 97, I think the holy grail for Starmer just now is to get some improvements that don't cost a lot of money. And, you know, Blair did that with his constitutional reform agenda with Scottish devolution. The Welsh Assembly didn't really cost a huge amount of money, but it changed British politics fundamentally. I think Starmer needs things like that in an economic context to be seen to be moving the country in the right direction, putting us on the right path. One of the things that I think is to his advantage is that he hasn't promised a great deal. There's a lot of grey in the manifesto. And so the things that he's going to be judged on compared to what he says in the manifesto are relatively few and far between. So he's in a pretty good position where he can under-promise and maybe over-deliver when he's in office. I think that unless he doesn't completely mess it up, I would imagine that the economy is going to pick up a little bit, and the suggestions that interest rates are going to fall later in the year. Inflation is obviously falling just now as well. So there are signs of a mini recovery in the economy, which would only be good for revenues. But as ever with Labour, people don't doubt that the Labour Party or Labour government will spend more money. It's whether it's going to be spent well, and you see noticeable improvements in public services like NHS and the education service. And I think that will be his challenge, not only delivering things, but ensuring that people give the Labour government credit for those improvements as well.
I think, though, it's a bit sort of, I understand what you're saying, Paul, but, you know, this is one of the things that's been pointed out for both the Tories and Labour in this election, is the grey areas in the manifesto. And I know, obviously, no political party is going to set out exactly, you know, everything that they're going to do. But I think with Labour and the Tories, there's a lot of sort of question marks and a lot of areas that are just unclear as to, you know, their position or their plans for it. And I think, well, I kind of agree with you that it could be a positive thing, but it also could backfire if they're wanting to do things that could be unpopular, and then it's going to look like they've snuck it through because they've not actually said that that's what they're planning.
Yeah,
I think.
Sorry, Lorna, on you go.
No. I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, the Institute of Fiscal Studies is saying that neither the Tories nor the Labour are being entirely honest about tax rises and what's going to happen. Now, they're not saying that, you know, the Labour definitely are, but they're certainly giving an indication that it's not going to be easy, and they don't believe that without some other tax rises, they will be able to do what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think that one slight concern from a Labour perspective of this campaign is that the longer it goes on, the more they're having to rule out specific tax rises. Now, clearly in the manifesto, they said no rises in income tax and national insurance. I think that makes political sense, but they're also ruling out, I think, a revaluation of the council tax, and they've been sort of squeezed a little bit on capital gains. I mean, you don't want to get into a position where you're in government on July the 5th and you made all sorts of promises that close off progressive options for raising more revenue. I also think that on the grey areas bit, they are scarred by the 2019 Corbyn manifesto, which promised so much you know, there was just like this vast transformation of British society with about 500 policies, and I don't think voters really thought it was a credible manifesto. I think their number one priority will be stability, get more money flowing into the Treasury, and then perhaps turn on the spending taps like Gordon Brown did after year 3 of the last Labour government.
Well, I suppose the people that have got a bit more to worry about at the moment are the Tories. As we've often spoken about, things just go from bad to worse and worse again. So the betting scandal, Rishi Sunak has finally taken action after almost 2 weeks, I think. So he's removed his backing for 2 Conservative candidates accused of betting on the election day. The wife of one is implicated in this, as is the PM's former close protection officer. And today it looks like it's widening. We've got 5 other police officers now being probed. Now, could this get even bigger? And why on earth does it take so long for parties, and I say all parties, to act on allegations of alleged wrongdoing?
Oh, this is like one of my most hated, you know, or sort of my bugbears about when things go wrong in politics, the length of time, exactly what you said, the length of time it takes to take action. Obviously, you know, ordinary members of the public, in this situation with the Tories, you know, you've got this guy, Craig Williams, who a fortnight ago admitted placing a bet. And yet, you know, it was very much, oh, we need to wait for this independent investigation. And it's like, well, no, sorry, if somebody has actually admitted wrongdoing, then I don't really know what more there is to investigate.
Well, they should be suspended.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Somebody should be suspended.
Yeah.
That's what would happen in the real world with anybody else.
But, you know, I think now the fact that they have been suspended, you know, I think it's quite obvious that the feedback from Tory candidates clearly on the doors is this is coming up all the time. You need to do something about it. People, you know, this is cut through to people. But it just makes them look as if they were potentially trying to get away with it or push it down the road, get these candidates elected, and then, you know, oh, we'll kind of deal with it then. So, yeah, but on a sort of broader sense, I think politicians and parties too often hide behind these sort of faux investigations that actually, in my view, unless it's a criminal investigation, you know, then you can kind of take action at any stage. Just because, you know, the gambling commission are investigating something doesn't mean you can't suspend a candidate. It doesn't have any impact on that investigation.
Yeah, I mean, Sunak was in... I was just going to say, Sunak was in Edinburgh yesterday, and I was at the press conference, and I think he was asked repeatedly about this whole saga on STV, and he just didn't answer the question. And then lo and behold, the individuals are suspended today. It's a bit like the Michael Matheson scandal, where, you know, rather than just putting everything out up front, it was just dragged on and on and on. I know sometimes that part of the reason for that delay, clearly there's like cover up, and that's part of it, but sometimes the powers that be struggle to get the information out of the relevant people. Now, clearly this is a different case because he admitted it straight up, but you know, sometimes people are not that forthcoming about matters, and that can explain the delays. But, you know, it's another sign that Sunak, he's just running out of time to turn this around. You know, between now and polling day, what could possibly happen that is going to save this election for him? There's so many things that happen during the campaign.
Nothing is going to happen that can save the election for him. I think he actually, you know, will be happy if nothing happens which further damages the Tory party. You know, I thought on this candidate thing with the suspension, you know, there's going to be people who've been defending these candidates and defending the position of the Tories for the last 2 weeks who are now, you know, absolutely furious. For example, Douglas Ross, who's finally come out of hiding over the weekend because he kind of disappeared for about 10 days. But he obviously launched the Tory manifesto, and then he was on Good Morning Scotland this morning, and his fair play to him, he was doing a radio phone-in as well. But he, before this suspension was announced, he was defending the Tory position and saying, you know, I agree that we should wait for the investigation. And literally about half an hour after that, it's announced that they're suspended. And I just think he must be, you know, pretty raging because it makes him look idiotic.
Well, I think that's been the problem, obviously, that the Scottish Tories have had, or one of the many problems that they've had, is that they have to just deal constantly with whatever car crash is happening down south.
But also self-inflicted wounds as well, like resigning in the middle of a campaign.
Yeah.
So I do think Sunak and Ross are kind of locked in competition to see who's had the worst campaign in the history of British politics.
No, it's Rishi Sunak, obviously.
He's got the gold medal and Douglas has got the silver.
Yeah, Douglas Ross has got the silver medal. I think maybe John Swinney's got the bronze with this stamp stuff.
Yeah, I think we've certainly had to endure, the kind of deniability, the lying from all different parties when, all of us uncover something that they've been done. And it never ceases to amaze me that with the amount of spin doctors, highly paid civil servants, that they do not realise that the public are pretty astute. And if they actually held their hands up, moved on, it would be over. I mean, it was Alistair Campbell who said, it shouldn't, no scandal should last more than 2 days. And if it does, then you're not dealing with it properly. And I think that's true. And on just about everything you can apply that to. And yet almost every political party, bar Labour at the moment, are unable to actually deal with their many problems.
I know, it feels like Keir Starmer's just going from one chat show couch to the next. He's basically doing keepy ups all the way to polling day. It's just
yeah.
And yeah, you're right, Paul. You can, they don't have firm policies, and there's a grey areas. But you also think, well, all he has to do is get nothing wrong between now and next Thursday. And, he could get that supermajority that everybody's been talking about. Interestingly enough,
do you not think so?
Rachel Reeves, sorry, Hannah.
No, I was just going to say, right, obviously, the Tories were on a bit of a shaky peg anyway when Rishi Sunak called the election, just because of Partygate and COVID and all the rest of it. But do you not think actually, obviously Keir Starmer's had to do some stuff to, improve his party's position and to appeal to people. But I think given that the Tories campaign has gone so badly, it matters less who the opposition leader is, because does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying, a Labour rosette on a monkey and they would be elected. I'm not saying it like that, but I just think it's gone so badly for Rishi Sunak that at this point it doesn't really matter what Labour says or does, as long as they don't completely mess things up.
And is that, Paul, kind of the electorate's feeling? Do you get the feeling that people, I don't get the feeling that people are saying, I'm absolutely, passionate about Labour, everything that they're saying is correct, this is what I want. I get the feeling that people are saying, that there needs to be some sort of change. Some people may have to hold their nose to vote Labour. Some people are doing it, but we just have to do something.
Well, I think that politics is a comparative business. So you just inevitably compare one party to the next. And when you do that, in this particular election, it's hard to vote Conservative, given everything that they've done and what they're continuing to do in this campaign. In previous campaigns, such as the 2019 election, voters preferred Boris Johnson to Jeremy Corbyn, and they preferred Theresa May to Jeremy Corbyn. They preferred David Cameron to Ed Miliband. And so in terms of that comparison, Labour have got their act together and the Tories are just sinking like a stone. And you're right. I think that this campaign and the result we're going to get next week is probably more to do with loathing about the Tories than it is genuine love for Labour. People still got questions about them. I know folk who are voting Labour and they have a couple of fears here and there, but you change the subject to the Conservatives, there is disgust and there is anger. And that, I think, is the dynamic in this election. It hasn't been like this since the days of Tony Blair. As Hannah said, barring a disaster, there's going to be a Labour government on July the 4th.
And do you think that there is, a contingent of SNP voters who will vote Labour now because they are furious with the SNP?
Yeah, I think a big moment was when the Supreme Court basically kiboshed the ability of the Scottish Parliament to hold an independence referendum. At that point, there just didn't seem to be a route map to independence or an indie ref, and there's still not been a credible plan B. FID, plan B, plan C, plan D. None of them have looked legitimate. And so if you support independence, you're probably looking at the political process and thinking that it's not working for you, and the SNP do not have any answers. On top of that, you're looking at the record of the government in Edinburgh, and they've just lost their ability to deliver basic policies. I mean, you look at the way that they messed up the DRS scheme. I mean, not even being able to deliver a recycling bottling scheme seems pretty symbolic of the troubles of the Scottish government. So although there is a third of the electorate that I think will still vote for the SNP, that's way down on where it was in 2019 and 2015. And I think the question is not whether they fall in terms of seats, but how far they fall. You
wouldn't like to give a prediction, Paul, at the moment?
I don't know. I still think that it might be quite tight. If Humza Yousaf had clung on as leader, I think you might be looking at the SNP winning fewer than 10 seats. But despite John Swinney having a terrible start to the campaign, I feel like he's maybe stabilised it a bit. When I see him in the debates, he just comes across as quite an authoritative, calm figure. And so I think that the result that we'll get next week will be better than it would have been under his predecessor.
Hannah?
What's my prediction?
Yeah, go on.
I think the SNP will get less than 20 seats. And I think Labour will. Yeah, I think the SNP will get less than 20. I think the Tories might retain 2 seats. And I think Labour will get the majority of the rest of them.
Yeah, it's very different times, isn't it? Anyway, there's a woman coming into, looks like she's coming into number 11. Rachel Reeves will become the first female Chancellor. So isn't it about time that we had a woman in there? A woman that's balancing the books.
Paul, what do you think? I think
it's remarkable that we've not had a female Chancellor. We've had female Prime Ministers, female Foreign Secretaries, female Home Secretaries, and the fact that no one has been at the Treasury, leading the Treasury, is a pretty damning indictment of British politics. So I think it's an absolute certainty that if Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, then Rachel Reeves will be his Chancellor. And to be fair, I think she's had a very accomplished election campaign. Hasn't put a foot wrong. Hasn't made any rash promises that she can't keep. And I think she'll be a pretty formidable Chancellor when cabinet ministers come knocking on her door demanding money for pet projects.
Well, the one thing that I love about her is that I feel that, there's the representation issue, but there's also the issue that, it is mainly women that are affected by a lot of the financial policies that come, down the line. And I think she's very much got that in mind. She will understand that some of the decisions that she makes could have ramifications for women. And yeah, generally think women are better at kind of balancing the books. Hannah?
I just think, well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I don't think that, a woman is better in this job, a man is better in this job. I think that when it comes to government, I think both men and women could do all of the roles pretty much with the same ability. But I think that it's crazy that in 2024, we still have not had a female Chancellor. It's almost like laughable that is the situation. Yeah, I just don't understand why it's taken this long.
Yeah, it's interesting when Angela Rayner was up in Scotland, she talked very much of it's not just her and Keir, it's her, Keir and Rachel. And Rachel's integral to everything that, they do, as Paul says. I mean, yeah, when ministers want money, when there's, it's her that they'll have to go to. But I think she's the kind of quiet power as well. She's incredibly smart, so hopefully she'll be able to financially help us come out this hole that we're in at the moment.
Yeah. I also think she's better than Annalise Dodds. Yeah. Remember Annalise Dodds was the she shadow chancellor for a while. If I just made that up.
Yeah, he was the first shadow chancellor.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I think the shadow cabinet has grown in strength, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Hannah, for joining us today. You can find Planet Holyrood on the Daily Records YouTube channel and on Spotify.
It's important we look at the facts. Politics has to be about service.
A modern form of national service.
The outcome, that's for the voters to decide.